English translation, 182nd Contact, Part 1. Thursday, 3rd of February, 1983, 22:31 hours.
It has become late today. I already expected you during the day.
Unfortunately, my work did not allow for an earlier appearance.
You are always busy.
The concerns that I have to deal with concern a group member yet another time.
Oh no, that is something entirely new.
One should have your humor, my friend. Unfortunately, there remains no other option to me than to deal with this unfortunate concern. Elsa gives us the greatest concerns because her whole mind has become destructive, whereby she grossly neglects her duties to the community and to the mission. Up to the present hour, it was not yet possible that she could be used for her actual destiny in the mission, for a lot of her actions allowed no guarantee that she would fulfill this task. Lately now, the prospects for such a guarantee deteriorate even more because her sense rapidly changes into a mission-hostile and community-hostile thinking. Not in the least because she has not yet fought against and has not removed her autocratic nature, but rather carries this out in a more peculiar manner. Furthermore, she has let herself become ensnared by the unreal influences of Glanzman, with whom she stands today in closest contact, and more often than not, in the form of being together. And in order to be able to do this, she is not in the habit of being honest to the group, and to you but quite the opposite, for she tries to get around fulfilling her duty by simulating illnesses. Recently, even an open refusal and rebellion now begin to work, for she no longer even follows my instructions. Through this, she deliberately destroys the power circle of the meditation with the small pyramid, which can be built according to a certain scheme and can be preserved through this. To my knowledge, you have made it known to her that a failure during the meditation means that two other extraordinary participations have to occur for this, which cannot be changed by me at present, even with the best intentions, because I just cannot revoke natural laws. Through this, it will take effect that through the querulousness of Elsa, the power circle will slowly but surely be demolished, whereby the power of the pyramid and the meditations will slowly but surely become ineffective and even turn into negative power fields. The whole thing will only be fully functional. Then, if all group members meet their times of meditation with the small pyramid and also carry out the necessary extraordinary participation, which will entail a certain amount if a failure appears. However, Elsa is not concerned about this, whereby she deliberately drives everything to destruction. All this just because of her querulousness, and as a result of the unreal influence of Glanzman, who already long ago succumbed to the delusion that he is the embodiment of the ancient prophet Ezekiel.
His delusional notion is well known to me, already for more than 2 years. He also still believes that he has some contacts with other dimensioned beings and powers.
This acceptance is of a morbid imagination, because he has deprived himself of these powers and opportunities by his wrongdoing, such that he can never attain them in this life again.
But that still does not change the sad fact surrounding Elsie, who is influenced by him in such an unfortunate and false wise.
That is of correctness. Moreover, she herself lives in the unreal delusion that she is capable of thinking and acting more rationally and more logically than we, who are millions of years ahead of your development. She even has the nerve in her relevant delusions to doubt and to disregard our explanations and insights and our instructions because she feels set above us in her quick and clever thinking and challenges our logic. She even goes so far as to maintain, against better knowledge, that we would be subject to mistakes with regard to judgments and orders relating to the group members, etc. But this in no wise corresponds to the truth. We probably have our faults, even in her case, but not in terms of decisions and not in terms of wrong assessments of the truth. Our fault always only lay in the fact that we were never able to understand and failed to recognize that the Earth human thinks untruthfully in his or her superficial thinking, while other more profound thoughts are present. In other words, this means that the Earth human usually maintains untrue thoughts in his, her superficial thinking, which never correspond to truthful thoughts, and all this just to gain personal advantage through it. And Elsa also belongs to this kind, as we unfortunately had to recognize. So in truth, the failure does not lie with us, but with the fallible Earth humans. Moreover, we ourselves only committed the mistake that we accepted the lies of the superficial thoughts as the truth, whereby misjudgments came about. But in truth, the fallible ones are the liars, thus those who maintain untrue thoughts and send these out in order to gain personal profit through this. This is a machination of very primitive and dirty value, which is, unfortunately, owned by Elsa, and because in this connection she already felt herself caught many years ago, she raised her voice in order to deny the truth. But that through this, she has even destroyed her own desires, which could have been fulfilled with certainty that she did not want and does not want to see and recognize. Since then, her sense only lies at pushing all of the errors she has committed off of herself and onto others, in order to feel justified by this self-deception. This is even a gross self-deception of the lowest negative value. There could only be a change in her, and this could only come about if she would reflect upon the truth and would act in accordance with it. From our side, we can no longer agree, under the present circumstances, to be helpful to her through impulses, as we also can no longer do this in the future for other fallible group members. Those who commit false actions will be excluded from our impulse-swinging waves in the future, so they will be released to the harmful swinging waves of the environment and to the course of fate. But this might mean serious harm for them. On the one hand, as a result of being released from the positive impulse-swinging waves, they will be susceptible to health hazards, which will likely lead to serious problems and to an uneasy life. This will also have a further impact on personal relationships, referring to other and intimate people, who will also lose our protection and will find a life with problems. According to the explanation of the High Council, ultimately, it will yet so happen with the fallible ones, such being lawfully determined, that after the deaths of the fallible ones, their following lives will no longer be given to the area of knowledge and to fast-paced evolution. Instead, they will arise in primitive people who are still ignorant of the knowledge of spirit and who still count as primitive people among the human beings of this world. Moreover, it should be possible that the following lives can, in full knowledge, be made fully aware of the present life and of the mistakes of the persons concerned, which were deliberately committed in malice, and this up to 7 consecutive lives without ever being given the opportunity of being able to leave the place of birth and, in the meantime, being able to arrive in civilized parts of the world. However, the High Council still sees another possibility, namely that the fallible ones reflect upon the truth and love, so that after some following lives, they can be newly integrated into a community that is aware of the process of evolution, like the present one, through which a few truth-thinking ones are led and through which progress is made with them, whereby a certain part of the goal can still be achieved, and all necessary values can later follow from that.
A very hard thing, I think.
According to the explanation of the High Council, this law represents a real possibility that someday the fallible ones can yet achieve their evolution. But from my side, I would have to send the fallible ones to a desolate and uninhabited planet, where they would yet have to think for the rest of their lives about what can be done to get through their mistakes and culpability, in order then to lead a progressive existence in the following life and in all lives after that.
You are rather angry, my friend.
Thus my words correspond to my utter seriousness. But on the other hand, I see the explanation of the High Council as a good solution.
And this you would actually carry out?
That is of correctness, and since this is very serious to me, all fallible ones, especially Elsa, would already experience this within an extremely short time. All previous applications, reprimands, pleas, and penalties, etc., that were issued have never produced a lasting effect, from which it is to be concluded that everything is of no use. Only firm action could still be really helpful, which is why I would follow the relevant advice of the High Council. But unfortunately, such measures are, at least at present, not possible on the Earth.
About that, I have already spoken many times with Engelbert and also searched for solutions, but we found none. On the other hand, I think that it is fairly common among certain human beings of the Earth that they behave themselves in such a ricocheting manner. And if I keep in mind what has sometimes happened in the past lives of many of these people, and what prospects they had for this present life, before you recently looked after them, then I think that their lousy machinations are rather damn primitive and that dirty thanks are due for this. Especially when you now speak primarily of Elsie. I think that just she should be of the greatest gratitude for your help and impulses, which have led her to a better life than what she herself has determined in life.
That is of correctness. Nevertheless, practically all of the fallible ones do not know that in their last or in several of their past lives, they lived as different personalities who did not live according to their destinies to such an extent that their following lives necessarily had to be impaired by the impulses of their memory bank, and this led to degrading lifestyles. But that their present existence has run within a good framework, and that this has only happened through our assistance, because we have broken through their old dispositions from which they had malignantly distanced themselves. Of this they are not aware. Nevertheless, this fact would have had to become known to them, at least in part, when they had thoroughly striven within the intended and feasible framework of the mission, of the truth, and also of the teaching.
So the whole thing, nevertheless, again leads to the fact that they themselves are responsible for their deeds and actions, even if the past commitments of their former lives are not known to them. And on the other hand, it is that each person always only makes the best out of their present life, without knowing about their lives before. So it does not matter whether they know what was in their previous lives, even though a few things may be of use. A wide variety of human beings fantasize that they had only acted evolutionarily in the past lives and led a good life, even though this often does not correspond to the truth, such as with Mrs. Elsie, who lived in Germany before her present life, and who came to an inglorious end there as another personality. Maybe it would be good if you would show the vital statistics of each group member in this connection, if, perhaps, it would be helpful.
We have had rather bad experiences with that. But maybe a shock would be really helpful. I will consider this important matter.
Could you mention nevertheless the data of the last life of Mrs. Elsie?
Tentatively, yes. Nevertheless, I would like to limit myself to just the main points, specifically identifying the data that she can verify at any time. But initially, a short explanation in advance is necessary, Elsa's true destiny, also in relation to the mission, is lost in her subconscious, and this has been the case for more than half a millennium. Since then, she has only lived at the edge of these determinations in a form according to notion, whereby she gave preference to worldly pleasures and vices. However, in every one of her past lives as other personalities, which led in her last 8 lives, without exception, to a violent end, which I will mention individually if I make up my mind to reveal these secrets to the group members. In any case, the contents of her last 8 lives always led to the fact that her life and her lifestyle were very negative and got very badly out of control of the good human nature. Thus, we had to use actions in logic and rationality for her present existence, in order to let her shape her life in a form that was positive in certain things. So also her birth occurred in a place and in a family that were not originally determined by her, but which we chose for her. That you also played a certain role with her during childhood, this was also planned by us. Through all of this, the events and developments went in such a wise, albeit with large hindrances, which led to that which had to bring success. Nevertheless, this success was only short-lived, for as things stand today, this is well known to you. But now, to come to speak on her last life. I need to explain this, her destiny, which was created at that time in connection with the present life, was rather vile, by which she would have sunk into extremely negative depths again. And if I now mention the facts of the last life of hers, then even the most ignorant Earth humans would understand what kind of life she would have had to expect as a present if someone would not have been helpful to her. In her last life, Elsa bore the surname Wendt, a name which she acquired by marrying a master carpenter. Master Carpenter Wendt and his wife, who was today's Elsa in her former personality, lived in Rostock after their marriage. There, her husband worked in his learned profession in his own workshop. Meanwhile, his wife had to tend to the household. She ran this household more poorly than rightly, because her mind was not set on manual labor, but on self-glory, bossiness, and pleasure of a prohibited form. Moreover, all of her thoughts and efforts were focused on a degenerated craving for recognition. Burdened from her current life which had been brought forward, she ingratiated herself with a larger number of men, and did not exactly remain loyal to her husband. This also led to the fact that she approached her husband's apprentice and maintained intimate relations with him. But when this same one then met a young girl, he wanted to stay away from his master's wife, who began to blackmail him, however. The young fellow found no other way out in his desperation than to poison the master carpenter's wife, his mistress, whereby she died a very painful death. In order to divert the suspicion of the murder from himself, the apprentice falsely accused his master Wendt of the murder of his own wife, who was then sentenced to death by the wheel. After that, the process against the innocent one lasted for 7 years, after which then, too late, an acquittal was made. The confession of the master carpenter, which was forced by torture, took place in the year of the murder of his wife, in the year 1835. The apprentice was never punished because he was able to conceal his murderous act throughout his life.
So now you have said it all.
You asked for it.
Recently, I think that maybe it would be good, in spite of everything, if one and another group member knew something about the past of their former lives, even though I've had rather bad experiences with such things. Your information can surely be verified, right?
That is of correctness. If Elsa is interested in it, then it will be an ease for her to learn about the truth of my information. The case of her former life in Rostock as the master carpenter's wife, Mrs. Went is stored under the year 1835 in the archives there.
I do not doubt that because I can still remember that time very well, when information was given to me about the man Arendt and the man Bertossi, also known as Zeton, which was then clarified and confirmed by Guido via an attorney. Thus, I need no further evidence for this than what you have provided by your explanations.
Then we have to lose no other words over this.
Right. I would also be interested in something else, namely how it now stands with the radio. Is it now possible that via this, you could give a speech to all group members?
We first have to clarify the technical possibilities, because concerning this, there arise all kinds of unforeseen difficulties. However, I will intensively strive with this in the next days and weeks, and in this case, you will also be needed repeatedly in order to carry out the necessary attempts.
I am always ready to serve.
That, I also must say. But now, my friend, I still have to give you another message which will not please you. It concerns advice from the High Council.
What, the cuckoo, is that unpleasant then?
There is an important matter, which we ourselves have had to think about since time immemorial, but which has now been grasped by the High Council. Since time immemorial, we have had some difficulties with regard to our neutrality towards all group members. This in the sense that it has often been rather difficult for us to behave neutrally toward these Earth humans. Even we are only human, and even if everything was always just a one-sided affair, we feel just as humans do, so every single group member has grown into our feelings, which often made it rather difficult for us to make our decisions. When defects arose in many of the group members, just because we were connected to our emotions, we often had great difficulties with regard to maintaining objective unity toward the fallible ones, because we always wanted to be supportive of them. So far, similar emotions, unfortunately, have only brought a few of the group members to us. Moreover, in some of them, there is even actually a strong feeling of coldness that permanently prevails against us, and also against the group members and other Earth humans. Elsa belongs to the group members of this kind, as well as Jacobus and some others. Nevertheless, from our side, the same loving thoughts and feelings of sensitivity also prevail toward these group members, which often gave us difficulties with our decisions, as I have already explained. At the beginning of our contacts, things were different because we were too focused on pure logic and, thus, strongly neglected our feelings. But as a result of your teaching, we had to recognize that, without these feelings, everything was different, incorrect, and too strict. In accordance with your instruction, all of our people changed their relevant actions and conduct, and since that time, a lot has changed to our advantage. But we have also had to recognize from these incidents that when a certain freedom of feelings is granted, many problems become larger. And from the resulting strong attachment to such freedoms of feelings, difficulties in terms of objectivity also appear, which are very often of a far-reaching nature and which can be inhibitive. That is the main reason why, against all reason, and in spite of the frequent, very evil misconduct of the fallible group members, we were always willing to resume the contacts and the mission, always with the hope that along with the false actions, insight would yet break through and that everything would take a turn for the better and, thus, take a large step towards the culmination point. But now, concerning this, the High Council, with their advice, has turned to us, saying that we should withdraw ourselves in order to hand our task over to other powers. Should we actually decide for this, it would mean that we would already have to break off our contacts with you within a short time, after which those who were previously unknown to you would then provide you with the necessary information. But this would only be purely pertinent. without any personal touch, to arising problems with the group members, etc. The reason for this advice, which is why this advice was given, is because we did not come to mention the renewed false actions of Elsa to the High Council, which caused them to give the advice just mentioned. Taking from its advice, I have to explain to you that we were supposed to bring Elsa to account, which would have meant for her that she would have already finished this life in July 1982, in accordance with her possibility of life duration. Something that was, however, prevented from happening by our manipulations as a result of the mission granted to her, which she had bound herself to fulfill. But now, the breach of her promise has persuaded the High Council to give its advice towards the removal of impulse assistance, the discontinuance of the contacts, and the abandonment of the further life monitoring of the fallible ones, who can be reincarnated, up to 7 consecutive lives among the people of the earth, with the full memory of this life and of their committed mistakes and deeds, where they will have no opportunity at all of arriving into knowing civilizations or of making their way up to a higher position in the nation in which they are born. Through this, during several lives, they will become aware of the awfulness of their wrong and malicious acts that were committed in their present life. Thus, the fallible lives will then be of full thoughtfulness, due to their knowledge that their people will be thousands of years ahead of them, without these ignorant ones being able to come under this knowledge so that they may bring it to use. If we explain these actions in logic and rationality, then we do not act against the existing laws because the laws of creation themselves include such provisions, according to which these natural laws always begin to work whenever a human life form gets very badly out of control of the good human nature and threatens to destroy certain creational goals. If the following lives are then lived according to natural laws, then in each case there is a reintegration into the old form, whereby the normal condition prevails once again, so the memories of the past lives only appear as a notion. If, after such events, a life form again breaks out into becoming very badly out of control of their good human nature, then there is no elimination of the spirit form, as you well know, but a further rectified series of rebirths.
Yes, I am informed of that. But I just think that not even this warning and fact enters into the skulls of those who would have to think carefully about this. Especially with Elsie, I see no hope because if she wants to be cleverer than you, as you say, then she is probably a hopeless case.
That is of correctness because that is to be feared. Her stubborn and self-important nature, that her truthfully quite quick and clever thinking and her extremely weak power of decision are truly able to grasp the full significance of the forthcoming proceedings, with regard to recognizing the truth. That must, unfortunately, be doubted, just as much as the fact that she will free herself from her dogmatic and recognition-seeking megalomania and from her materialism which is oppressing her.
Yet one could not do anything in order to teach her something better. Nevertheless, it would only be fair.
We cannot and may not take this possibility into consideration, because a relevant change to the truth can be and must only be accomplished by her. However, her dogmatic, megalomaniacal, and materialistically oriented thinking certainly do not allow for this. Only a very tough calling to account can yet be helpful to her. But just think of how deeply a human being, even an earth human, from whom the truth must have fallen away, and has fallen away, when he or she stands megalomaniacally over those instructive powers, who own the true logic and who are more advanced by millions of years in knowledge, recognition, ability, and in wisdom and love, and in the fulfillment of the creational laws and recommendations. Compared to us, Elsa is only an ignorant, tiny little thing, still nearly a newborn and ignorant person, who must first learn speech and thought in a laborious manner, while we already lead our lives in pure logic.
I cannot describe your words as insane, and even less as arrogant, on the contrary. I think that you still immensely understate things, and that you place your light and your people's light under the footstool.
It is very unfortunate that I must speak such words.
Of course, I understand you already, and I am damn tired of this. But to speak of this further, it never accomplishes anything. One could never lead low intelligentum and primitiveness to the truth with the truth. But tell me how it would be if you leave and if others come.
According to the given advice, any contact with you is supposed to be carried out by other powers, according to which the same contact person will never talk with you twice.
That is bitter, my friend, even damn bitter.
It is bitter, yes, but the final decision has not yet been made. But anyhow, you or the group members should decide on whether this conversation between us should be transmitted in the form of contact reports.
I would be very happy if I could conceal the sensitive areas during printing.
That should be yours or the group member's decision, whereby your word must take priority in all cases.
I will think about it.
You should do that. What I still have to tell you further is that we will leave the Earth before the end of this month for about 3 months, in order to devote ourselves to a study and an evaluation with respect to all group members, whereby we will have to work through a lot of material which we have recently made and recorded over all group members. Taljda, one who walks through the rainbow, who you know very well, along with various others, will maintain contacts with you in the meantime and make the necessary decisions on my behalf. However, you and all group members must be aware of the fact that Taljda is very strict and will not play around for too long if any demands or arrangements are ignored or violated. We too, who have stood in contact with you until now, will have to act in this manner in the future. Thus, it must now be clear to you and the group members that further violations will no longer be tolerated, but that only a strict compliance with our instructions, as well as with the provisions and ordinal rules issued by you, is acceptable in every sense and in every respect. Taljda, as my representative, will explain all that is necessary with your next meeting on the 5th of March, after which the strict rule then applies, that piece by piece you expropriate everything which you have received from us or which has been awarded. A smallest violation, whether it is carried out now or whether only an attempt is made, has as a consequence that a piece of property or a promise given by us to you will be taken back by us in each case. Now, in the future, when we give you 3 options of further assistance from us, that firstly, we speak with you in the coming time over the radio communication devices to all group members. Secondly, we deliver the Spirit Teaching now, 2021, called Creation Energy Teaching Material over the sound recorders. And thirdly, we answer the personal and individual questions of the group members in a separate form over the sound recording equipment. Then these promises will be gradually canceled and waived with each small violation of a measure issued by us, be it regulation or ordinal rule, and also in every case of a breach of regulation or ordinal rule, etc., issued by you, which is to serve for discipline and order, as well as for the mission. Violations in a conscious form are to be considered by us, as well as violations that result from not listening and then a lack of understanding coming about from it, but this also applies to such violations that arise due to misunderstandings. At the present time, after all the learning and experience, each individual group member must be above all violations of this kind, so that there can be no more discussion about them and, therefore, no more leniency for them. After our oral speech on the 5th of March, no more forbearance will be practiced, not even towards the smallest offenses. Only false actions due to ignorance or understandable carelessness and the like can still be treated in forbearance, but no more violations that would have to be repaired for years. And I state once again that for each violation of the aforementioned form, a piece of property given by us to you will be taken back, and the initial gifts to be taken back are to be those which we give as the last, namely the 3 promises related to communication, the teaching of the Spirit, creation energy teaching, and personal questions. Should that also be useless? Then the next step is the removal of the protection for the Sohar Center and, after that, the power effect there, according to which the neutralization location in the lower area will be released from its power. If even that was of no use, then the same would occur with the circle meditation pyramid after Y.
But you cannot do this because through this, you would take from all group members the only possibility of the evolution of a truer form.
We will do it, that is decided. No change is possible. At once, all group members must grow up and also must insert themselves into a discipline, which alone will guarantee that the goals are finally reached and the mission comes to its fulfillment. Unfortunately, it is still so, and this is the case with all group members, that it has not been recognized that just a certain order and compliance and the realization of a particular discipline can bring about success. Still, all group members are of the crazy notion that violations may occur out of forgetfulness. For after all, they are only Earth humans who are still in need of instruction and to whom forbearance should be exercised. This is a very erroneous view, and particularly those group members who had to perform military services and duties should already be beyond this. Just with them, and especially with them, insight and knowledge should have already matured long ago, such that in their private lives and especially in your group, a success in existence can be given if the points of the ordinances, regulations, ordinal rules and discipline, etc., are followed and kept, as it is also the case with the military services, where any small violation of every form is very strictly sanctioned and punished. But it is not remembered by those who know a lot in these matters and who know this very well, as a result of their knowledge from the army services, that without the observance of the given order, everything would only correspond to one wild pile of undiscipline, if I may speak again in your mode of expression. However, just as it so applies in the army, so it applies in every organization, in every school, and even in nursery schools, whereby it works admirably in the latter, regarding those issues that must be constantly complained of with the group members. In the kindergarten schools, there are small children, whereas the group members as a whole see themselves as adults, which therefore raises the question as to whether the group members are actually as mature as they would like to be. Thus, you will now certainly be able to understand that we cannot tolerate the old standing evils furthermore, which is why we must take measures which are very well seen as disciplinary penalties against violations. If the opportunity was given to us to punish offenses of the Earth humans according to our measures, in terms of law and order, then we would send the fallible ones to places and for times, which would certainly lead all fallible ones to reason and to the right and positive action in solidarity. On the other hand, we also have our ordinal rules, regulations, and arrangements, which we have to follow in solidarity and according to our best ability. Fortune and knowledge, without which we would have never reached the state of our current life, knowledge, love, insight, progress, and so on. Only with us. There was a time when the way of life and the future was decided by the entire people and by our former leaders at that time, such that from the moment of the decision, every life form actually strove, consciously and to the utmost, to follow and keep the given guidelines, ordinances, and regulations, etc., even though there were still many at that time who were of the same mistaken view as the group members of today. As a result, fewer than 620 humans had to be held accountable and abandoned for wrongdoing, even though our population at the time was more than 238 million. If we wanted to implement this with the Earth humans, then in any case, it could and would have to be that within a fraction of a second after a decision, an offense never occurs again.
However, one always appeals to the right to make mistakes.
A right never exists for violations of already adopted decisions. Mistakes can and may only be committed where there is still no knowledge and no experience. Also keep in mind when you, for example, committed offenses against the regulations, etc., which are very well known to you, how you could still fulfill your task, work, and mission in such a case. Because such actions are not owned by you, and you are always careful to be progressive, you continuously follow the law of efforts, namely, that all becomes better. That is also the reason why you continuously address us with new ideas and desires, through which assistance for the group members should develop from our side, such as your efforts to ensure that we should speak in audible form to the group members and give them the teaching of the Spirit, creation energy teaching, in a similar manner, and also stand with them on personal matters and answer their questions. And after more than 3 years, during which you even often excited us again and again with this strange request, we, nevertheless, decided on this step, while no group member ever knew or knows what the hard efforts on your side are in each case when we get involved in things that we have basically never thought of. And truly, no group member has ever kept in mind that everything we have done so far for some or all of the group members was due simply and solely due to your untiring initiative and perseverance, because we never would have done these things on our own. But you were always so modest in never letting it be announced that everything was only done due to your tireless efforts toward us, from the protection of, and the donating of, power to the Sohar Center, to the impulses that should be helpful to everyone, if at the same time we disregard those impulses that we have contributed before and since the births of all group members. But for a long time, we have been depressed and feel an ache inside ourselves, that all of these efforts are neither respected nor recognized, which you have undertaken for years for all group members, and that they are even ignored and then thanked by the fact that there continues to be violations of all kinds, and that all real success and progress are prevented.
You express too much praise, my friend.
That is not so, for the group members should finally be aware of who is the real initiator of all those values, which we handed over to the individual or all group members in the course of the last years.
You talk too much.
But in accordance with your sense, it is certainly the truth that I cannot find enough words to emphasize your relevant merit sufficiently, in order to ensure that the full truth is understood by all those human beings who, in many cases, almost completely destroy your hard work over and over again. The true victim is you, who strives year after year toward progress and success, and for privileges for all group members, who then reward you for this with offenses and knockdowns and neglect of true learning efforts.
Do stop at last. Your flattery is slowly getting on my nerves, and besides, it only makes me out to be a megalomaniac.
Your jokes find no hearing in me, on the other hand. I also find no other words to speak further of that.
Then we can finally take up a subject that is more reasonable than pointless adulation. On my side, I would still have a lot of questions that have already long burned on my tongue.
You can include those at a later time because for the time being, I still have different concerns, which I must discuss with you now.
Hopefully they are less in the mold, like just the previous things.
There you can be reassured.
Fine, then you can fire away at me.
Even though things do not correspond to the context of the proceeding, there are still some dark points to be addressed.
And I thought that this now would have actually come to an end for today.
The forms which are of a dark form, which are still to be explained, are of a more problematic nature.
Aha, then no further complaints.
That is of correctness.
Then get cracking at once.
Even though it does not concern any complaints, the concerns to be mentioned are still unpleasant. As you know, during the last weeks, we performed analyses and made clarifications over every single group member, in order to be able to meet our task with respect to talking and answering if personal questions are addressed to us over the communication devices, as you want. During these analyses, we strove to fathom even the innermost self of each individual group member, but we must explain this to you without it coming to the knowledge of all group members. For things came to light which cannot yet be mentioned in an open form, but rather in 20 years at the earliest, due to fears which are to be cultivated, that quarrels and accusations among all members of the group might appear. The things that were uncovered range from the simple lie to the heavy theft of relatively large sums of money. But through our analyses, we were able to understand various mysterious incidents which, now that we know the facts, are no longer mysterious in any wise, but are only infamous intrigues of individual group members or others who are not directly connected to the group. Nevertheless, the fact that we endeavored to perform analyses, even where it was not permitted to us until now because we found no authorization for it, but which was wrong, as we now recognize, it has given us insight into things which give us true terror. Never before have we felt entitled to suppose that in the deepest feelings and thoughts of the Earth humans, and also in various group members, so much falsehood, infamy, addiction to intrigue, lies, and selfishness prevails as we have determined through our analyses. But through this, it became clear to us as to why various group members have not yet recognized true freedom up to this day, and that they did not create this within themselves and, thus, do not live according to this afterward, but I would like to talk with you about that later. First, I would like to give you an example regarding our analyses, which they have yielded in detail. I would like to come to speak of a person who no longer lives with you, but who was excluded, yet who continues to give us and you problems. I refer here to Ferdinand Pfeifenberger, whose children should come under your care and under your supervision, which would only be possible, however, if Ingrid and Ferdinand could be received into the group again, which is not evident, nevertheless. This cannot be, for renewed discord would be caused by the two. But listen to what I determined from the analyses regarding Ferdinand. For example, twice you spoke to me of the fact that with the rabbit stable, the doors had been opened and the rabbits had escaped because someone had been messing around there illegally. My analyses clearly showed that this happened at Ferdinand's expense, as well as various other things that were inexplicable to you. The swan, of which you reported to me that it had escaped, also came to escape from the poultry yard by Ferdinand's hand, as he also ventured to rob several chickens of their lives by squeezing their necks until they suffocated. But he also acted in such a way with a duck. But that is not yet enough, because other evils have arisen in even greater numbers than you yourself can imagine. You can still remember that with you, within a very short time, all cats had disappeared, about which we also felt no sadness, but were of the opinion that the problems had been solved. With us, that is actually how it was for so long, until I discovered through the analyses of Ferdinand that 2 of the animals did not depart from the center in the manner that we had assumed. A white cat, you named the animal Molly, was so beaten by Ferdinand, while being tied up in a sack, that after its release, it escaped while groaning and sought refuge elsewhere with other people. Similarly, Ferdinand abused a second animal, which he struck unconscious, in order then to run it over repeatedly with his red vehicle, after which he then threw the dead animal to that place where you found it.
That guy should also be abused once. And Peepers, the red cat?
It is still in the vicinity of the center, running wild. But that has nothing to do with animal abuse. The real savagery resulted because of a fox that was clashing with the cat.
You have spoken of the fact that Ferdinand has committed even other misdeeds. Internal group affairs of the crudest kind, Ferdinand's misconduct in relation to the abuse of animals, marriage-destructive machinations by Billy's wife, as well as crass financial irregularities toward Billy and the whole group by her, betrayal to the outside by Billy's wife, who passed along tape recordings of the concerns of the core group meetings to outsiders, in order to inflict harm upon Billy and the group, equally dangerous assaults on Billy's life with knives, a hatchet hammer, scissors, and other objects, as well as murderous threats against him, defamations and denigrations against Billy by his wife toward group members and outsiders, etc., etc. Then fire away at once, my friend.
Toward the end of the month of March, the procedure of shifting the time forward, which is incomprehensible to us, and which is also carried out by the human beings of Switzerland, takes place once again. This incomprehensible procedure is designated as daylight savings time, which disturbs and interferes with the normal and established rhythms. At the same time, it is in no wise beneficial that through this daylight savings time, people must begin their labor an hour earlier than usual, so that by this incomprehensibly low intelligentum, already established rhythms and times are seriously impaired, whereby interferences appear that cannot be removed. With you, for example, the meditations are so disturbed, partly because the time is shifted, whereby the normal rhythm is impaired, and partly because all of our monitoring and impulse devices are set for existing specified times, and we simply cannot change them in their time functions because they are aligned toward the true, effective solar time.
But last year that was not yet the case, right?
That is of correctness. The reason why it is regulated in such a wise now is because we took into consideration a further assistance for all group members, which consists of a fixed time meditation, determined in accordance with the most valuable times of solar time. At the established times, all necessary forces are at their highest potential, which is why we selected these times. But if, now, the stupidity of daylight savings time becomes effective again, then everything is destroyed, with the efforts of the meditation becoming meaningless, powerless, and useless.
Idiotic. I mean with the daylight savings time. If the people would think a little more logically and cleverly, then this daylight savings time would not be necessary at all. The simplest thing would be to say that during the whole year, early morning work does not start at 7 a.m. but rather at 6 a.m. Thus, no daylight savings time would have to be introduced, so that in the evening there could be 1 more hour of leisure time. In addition, throughout the whole year, the end of work in the evening would always be at 4 p.m., which would give the people even other advantages. But for people to think so far and find reasonable solutions, that is asking too much. Yet I think that what you can do with your people on Era, that should also be good and inexpensive for the Earth humans. Just the fact that you do a lot of regular duty work on Era between the 6th and 8th hour of the morning, and after that, you can leave and do what you want. I have found that to be very fine and reasonable. And I just ask myself why this reasonable solution cannot be handled in such a wise on the Earth as well. Here on Earth, I have only seen this system handled in such a manner one time, with Director Demuth, where it worked out wonderfully.
That is well known to me. You also spoke of this on Era when we talked about this problem.
How would it be if we would simply disregard daylight savings time with respect to the meditation, and would retain the old time in the sense that we, in accordance with daylight savings time, simply shift the meditations an hour ahead? We allow the relevant clocks of importance to run for us in such a wise as they run now, and according to these clocks, we honor our commitments.
That is a very good idea, and it is even the solution to the problem. I also should have thought of that.
And now you have. Then this would be right?
If these concerns are handled in such a form, then all values will remain in full within the given framework. Your solution is of absolutely full value.
Then we should still see to it that we also find better solutions with regard to our work to be performed, and with regard to the evening meal. For when the time comes for changes, I must talk about that with Engelbert. My suggestion is that we fix dinner from 5:45 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. in order to work after that until 8:45 p.m., after which, on the days of meditation, the group meditation can then take place. On the other days, the days off like Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, the same time applies concerning the meal, and after that, if necessary, one can work for no longer than until 8:45 p.m. Also on Sundays, we have to work again, so something also has to be done there. The meditation on Sundays would be at 4 p.m. and on weekdays at 9 p.m. Also, the individual meditations taking place in the Sohar Center would have to be kept, of course, according to the old times.
I have also thought of similar decisions, but yours are more precise, so I will instruct that these must be carried out. The start of this should be 1 day before the effective beginning of daylight savings time. That would be, according to my knowledge, on the 26th of March. In addition, I still have to explain the following. Together with you, we calculated that as of the 1st of January 1985, the financial situation and the labor force of the whole group must have progressed so far that those who are working outside can be fully employed, as of this date, in the center. But this stipulates that full employment is carried out by every single group member, and that all necessary reforms are developed, only by which earnings can be guaranteed in the center. But if one continues in the old and present wise, then this culmination point cannot be reached. The group members must increasingly be prepared for employment and to work more intensively, more rationally, as well as more joyfully. Silvano, for example, lately diminishes in his achievements enormously, and his lethargic manner of working has erupted again in full measure. So for works that require 25 minutes of time to complete, he needs a full 3 to 3:12 hours, as I have determined. In addition, if the weather is not exactly sunny, then he drags out this time even more in length. If this behavior and others do not stand under the minimum level of achievement immediately, then it is necessary that he be replaced by another person, which Taljda will arrange, who will act as my representative until mid-year. She has been instructed by me to observe these things until the end of April, and if necessary, make new decisions. Also with Thomas, more attention must be given to employment because he shows too much consideration in himself, as this is also the case with Freddie. They do not see occurring jobs, let alone the possibility of independently settling such jobs through self-initiative, In addition, Thomas puts too much emphasis on his physical disadvantages, and through this, evils appear. He should strongly consider this. Lewis works according to his abilities very well, but he always tends toward the possibility of appearing for duty at a much later time than what was arranged by me. The danger that he will soon return to his everyday life with this is already very great again. Also, Sissy must increasingly fulfill her responsibilities, and starting from the month of May, it also applies to her that every month she has to appear at each regular or irregular meeting, in the latter case, if it is necessary. Nevertheless, she must comply with the statutory given monthly meetings. In the future, this applies to everyone, even to new members. Margaret can be left as the only valid exception, whose precarious financial situation is known to us. Also, Maria and Connie, starting from the month of April, must be increasingly used more intensively for teamwork, but also all others, for only through this can the necessary occurring jobs be done, which should lead to the goal. Taljda, according to my instructions, will deal with who has to perform what jobs and at what times. At the end of the month of March, or at the beginning of the month of April, she will remit the instructions relating to this, whereby all group members must be clear about the fact that Taljda is neither inconsistent nor able to be influenced in any things. So her instructions must be strictly followed. Otherwise, she will relentlessly and consistently uphold and carry out the sanctions, which are provided in the cases of infringements.
Somewhat military-like, but I think that discipline, etc., is necessary. Even in the civil defense, there is more order in this respect than what is often the case with us.
That is of correctness. Even though our view is that this civil service mentioned by you represents an imposition for the Earth humans, and it is incomprehensible to us how grown people can take part in such senseless and lowly intelligentum type of activities, which also eat up a lot of financial resources, which could truly find better use toward emergency relief on the Earth.
Your word in the ear of all those who childishly devise and carry out this crap, which does not apply to the military itself.
Even if they could hear my words, those responsible would still not change, because in their thinking and deeds they are primitive, of low intelligentum and childish.
To whom you say this?
I know, my friend, but we should now talk about other things because we cannot argue all night over these issues.
Of course.
When I explained the last predictions to you, we dealt with the thought as to whether such predictions will finally be useful or not. Since then, I have striven to make various analyses over this, which have shown that with a small percentage of Earth humans, such predictions fall on rather fertile ground, whereby the majority of terrestrial humankind probably takes note of them. However, no consideration is given to these, so no success of a deliberate change to the better is to be expected with the majority. But the smaller percentage, which does take on the predictions and generates some form of positive change within themselves, might be of value, so we will continue to deliver such predictions.
That is gratifying. Then you do want this.
That is of correctness.
I thought that, if so, this should only be ready in March.
Up to the month of March of this year, I have given you such predictions. But for the following time after that, you will have no further information from my side.
I remember that, but I thought that you, if even already, would first give me new data in March.
As I have told you before, I leave the Earth for several months. For this reason, I am not here in the month of March, which is why I could not pass along any predictions to you.
Excuse me, I am rather slow on the uptake.
At the moment, you did not think of my words which said to you that I will be absent,
In addition, I can now also say, that is of correctness.
That is of correctness.
Exactly, so I thought myself. It could not have been otherwise.
Many humans have certain phrases, and so do I.
Sure, that is correct, but too much already gets boring.
It must also be fun.
If not, then I would at most already be stale. But go on already.
So I ended with the predictions in the month of March, 1983. If I now continue on from there with the explanations, then I must mention some events that will happen in Israel. There, the mass murderer. Begin will finally be restricted in his power because a new prime minister, a bad opponent of Begin, will take power. Thus Begin finally falls behind and loses much of his power. Afterward, then, first comes the appearance of natural phenomena again, which will be talked about worldwide, and which, unfortunately, must be lamented over with the loss of human lives. Around the turning point of March-April, so in less than a month, the Mount Etna volcano in Sicily will again eject large quantities of its red-hot interior and will cause much damage, after which then, only a few days later, an earthquake is expected in the country of Colombia, which will demand up to 1,000 human lives, and at least the total destruction of half of the city of Papayan.
These earthquakes will probably never end, and human beings also will not become smarter as a result.
That is of correctness.
I have wondered for a long time how our own people, the group members, actually react to these events, and above all, how they react to the fact that you can always predict everything so very well. Do you have any knowledge in this respect?
At times, I have performed analyses over that, whereby I have also encountered facts that are of a rather unpleasant nature. But in general, the group members are impressed.
And what is unpleasant?
Actually, a blatant unpleasantness only exists in one case.
Must I individually draw out the answers from you again?
You yourself might know with whom this unpleasantness appears, namely with Elsa. Neither the predictions nor the fact of the respective incoming events impresses her greatly. Already for too long, her thinking, feeling, and acting have been away from the fulfillment of the mission and from the truth that she could still see clearly in these concerns. She has very much alienated herself from everything, and particularly from the truth, because she only sees herself, and she egoistically and dogmatically overrates her own identity and her own interests. Her seeing eye has become blind, both through her selfishness and also through outside influences, whereby former group members have a decisive influence. In addition, her knowledge of the truth has so deteriorated and degenerated that she can no longer recognize even the smallest truths for many years and even questions our existence. Already for some time, her erring and incorrect thoughts have been dealing with ideas that you would act as a swindler in relation to us and our existence, and that we would merely be the figment of your imagination. But to respond to her about this would be pointless of you, because she has already so entangled herself in a web of lies that she would deny this fact by all means. She does not let the truth of her severe and morbid addiction to dogmatism, self-pity, ambition, and all other evils that have erupted be valid anymore, which is why she wants to cover each truth with untruths by all means, and it has already been like this so often that she even believes her own false claims and untruths. I determined this fact at that time when we first performed analyses for every single group member, which Elsa designated as wrong in her case, in a manner that was dogmatic and insulting to us, and as though it had been taken from the air, whereby she still scurrilously swore at us, particularly at Ptah and me. As I told you at that time, we were compelled by this to discontinue some forms of impulses, which had been emitted toward Elsa since her birth. In the absence of these impulses, she got ever more tangled up, and she deviated from her determinations and their fulfillment more and more. And now that she has become even more alienated to everything in malicious wise, I am forced to stop other forms of impulses, whereby her initiative and concentration in her private life and with regard to her private work as a sewing teacher will decrease and rapidly decline, whereby a mental and physical decay will also take place, but this will occur at a very slow pace. Thus, it is given that she escapes from our protection, as well as from her group membership, and that naturally she lives against her own death determination, which we had influenced and cancelled through our impulses, so that she could fulfill her task and could still have a long time to learn. But under the given circumstances, with her wrong and contentious doing, thinking and acting, we see no reason not to surrender her to her own self-destructive destiny, uninfluenced by us, whereby she maneuvers herself into her own ruin and remoteness. As a result of the renewed discontinuances of impulses, everything with her will have so worsened in a month that she will flow into a state of counter-defenseless helplessness, which she can no longer work herself out of, and she will long for relief. This, if she does not deliberate herself to the better, and if she does not return to the truth and to the fulfillment of her duties in reference to the mission and responsibility, which if she does, we are prepared to let all impulses act upon her again, whereby everything would turn to the good for her again, and she would learn far beyond her own life culmination point determination.
So you would help her again if she would reflect upon herself and would return to the right path?
That is of correctness. For on the one hand, she has determined certain tasks for herself for the fulfillment of the mission. And on the other hand, we have invested so much work in Elsa, already for decades, and especially during her immediate life, such that we could only be pleased if she would be converted back to the truth.
Perhaps it would be good if it was revealed to her what her former personalities and lives really were, and that these were often not good, by any means, in large numbers. Furthermore, in relation to this, one should put down the madness in reference to me, because over and over again, some deceased ones are requisitioned, whom I was supposed to have been in former lives. Presently, and already for some time, one imputes to me that I was once Karl Marx and Nostradamus.
That is well known to me, and slowly, this low intelligentum gossip must become rather annoying to you.
That it does, and especially because I know that these presumptions are not correct.
These concerns should not disturb you any further because Ava will strive around this matter in order to give you some data about your past lives. She has long been occupied with this, and I will also send her the appropriate impulses. She can call her previous knowledge without hesitation, according to which a few things will smooth themselves out. Concerning Elsa and the other group members, we are working to gather the data, but it is questionable, at least at present, whether more is supposed to be mentioned with respect to Elsa. The experiences with her in regards to these issues are, unfortunately, very negative.
I know that, unfortunately.
Thus we will first have to hold counsel over that.
Then we will just see what results from the council.
That is of correctness.
Once again, yes.
But now we should have spoken enough of these concerns, because even though they are of importance, we may not announce too much, at least not yet. On the other hand, I have to tell you other things from which we have deviated again.
Right, go on then.
If you really have no more questions?
I always have questions.
It also cannot be otherwise with you. What question do you still have?
Something completely different, namely with respect to the moon. Up there is a myriad of craters, such as also on Mercury, or on other soil planets and satellites. It makes me wonder now as to when the last big meteor impact took place on Earth's satellite, how big the projectile was, and where this occurred on our moon.
The last great impact was made by a meteorite in the year 1178, during the time of the new moon, and the impact happened on the upper eastern quarter of the moon. The origin of the meteorite, as it was held at that time by our ancestors, lay in the asteroid belt that runs its course around the Sun between Mars and Jupiter. The investigations at that time showed that in the year 408 BC, for reasons that are inexplicable to us, a meteorite measuring 1,128 meters in diameter separated from the asteroid belt entered into a staggering periphery course around the Sun and ever more approached the Earth. In the year AD 1178, it was then so far along on its direct course with Earth's satellite that it fell on the surface of the moon, close to the light border that is visible from the Earth. As a result of this, there was an enormous explosion which hurled light waves and rocks so high above the lunar surface that the impact could even be observed from the Earth by the naked eye.
Then it must have been really huge, nevertheless.
So it was, that is of correctness.
Could you, perhaps, give me even more information concerning such things?
That can be the case, also with respect to other incidents that interest you.
Good. Then I will come back to that at a later time.
That you should, but now I would like to tell you of other things to come. Regarding natural disasters and major political events, there is nothing to report, at least until the middle of the year 1983. Earthquakes will likely occur in different countries, such as in California, where particularly San Francisco will be bereaved. Floods and droughts will also become a talking point, but they are largely not worth mentioning, just like the unusual great activity of the volcano Etna in Sicily, whose lava flows are to be rerouted by human hands. Also, 2 large storm floods in America and elsewhere are hardly worth mentioning. But what is worth mentioning is the AIDS disease, which will very quickly spread itself starting from 1983 and will demand many victims. This disease is brought in from America to Europe, and already by mid-year it will claim many deaths, even in your home country, Switzerland.
I have already heard different things about this scourge, but I think everything is trivialized in order not to frighten the population. In addition, it concerns a disease of actions to do with having gotten very badly out of control of the good human nature, which was created in basic form by degenerated sodomy homosexuals. Editor's note: sodomy has to do with having sex with animals.
That is basically of correctness, but it only indicates a small part of the truth. According to our preliminary findings, this disease epidemic that is still incurable for the Earth humans, which is not unknown to us, is the product of a virus that is disfigured and mutated by force, which completely paralyzes and even destroys the human body's self-defense system, which must inevitably lead to death, even in cases of only minor sicknesses or injuries. The Earth humans themselves bear the guilt for this deadly disease, namely the unnatural ones, referring to those who are sexually unnatural, whose actions are incomprehensibly endured, tolerated, or even supported by many Earth humans.
With this, you address the sodomitic, degenerate homosexuals and bisexuals.
That is of correctness. In addition, the sodomitic, degenerate bisexual men also actually belong to this. Both are equivalent to a breach of natural law, which will inevitably lead to serious consequences and even death, because what is natural cannot be ignored, disturbed, and avoided throughout many millenniums without this avenging itself one day. Normal homosexuality and normal bisexuality are naturally against nature. But they are not reprehensible, and they do not violate natural law, just as bisexual and homosexual relations among female life forms are not abnormal and are not unlawful.
The reason is well known to me, and I have also described that in detail in my writings. Thus, at least for those who know, there can be no doubt that homosexuality is naturally against nature, as well as genetically conditioned, and that it is not unlawful, as also the lesbian uniting of female forms is not unnatural.
That is well known to me. But now, hear what origin this disease epidemic has. Basically, it was caused by the sodomitic, degenerate unnaturalness of homosexual and bisexual men, who got together and pursued sexual machinations with animals. Thus, they gave themselves over to sodomy. In particular, the disease was caused by the self-coming together of different active substances that are only carried in simian life forms, which could combine themselves with those humans through the disgusting sexual sodomizing of men. In and of itself, the resulting transmitted and already very old and dangerous disease would have still been curable by earthly medicine. But because the sodomites sexually erred among the homosexuals and bisexuals, the disease pathogen changed in such a manner that it became an absolutely fatal factor against which the medicines and means of defense must now be found and be produced. However, it is to be feared that these medicines will only be found when the epidemic already runs rampant worldwide, which can lead to similar events, like at the time of the plague, which was also able to claim many victims through the guilt of the human beings, for they...
About that, I would like to know more about that after what you said.
You shall receive information about it, so we can stay with the explanations about the AIDS epidemic. Thus, the sodomitic, degenerate, homosexual, and bisexual men who act despicably and who act contrary to the natural laws bear the guilt for this disease. But also to blame for this epidemic are those in particular who tolerate and who advocate the sodomitic, degenerate homosexuality and the sodomitic, degenerate bisexuality as well as the sodomy, even though these forms of sexual acts are absolutely contrary to the laws of nature and whose operation, in any case, will ensure that sooner or later lethal or at least life-threatening consequences will appear, to which many life forms of the same kind will fall prey. And that will also happen in this case because those who are jointly responsible and also those who are innocent will soon be attacked by the AIDS epidemic, including the heterosexuals, who are also designated as normal sexual. The AIDS epidemic is transmitted like any other dangerous venereal disease, so not only through direct contacts, especially through sexual activity, but also through blood kisses on mouth sores and through open wounds, and furthermore through indirect contacts, like the union with bloody saliva and blood transfusions, etc., that the disease pathogens can fix themselves on certain materials, such as toilet bowls, glasses, towels, etc., and survive for a longer time and, thus, also act contagiously on other human beings. That is not the case. But as things stand, the AIDS pathogen, in this respect, also behaves the same as pathogens of other sexually transmitted diseases, as I already mentioned. In each case, however, the Earth humans must exercise the greatest caution. Otherwise, the epidemic will begin to run rampant very quickly and will become global within the shortest time. Direct sexual contact with strangers or such people, of whom one cannot be certain of their health to the greatest percent, should be avoided. After hand greetings, the hands should be promptly cleaned again, and intimate greetings with a kiss and the like should be entirely omitted, as well as physical contacts of all sexual kinds, including the unlawful custom of the Earth humans of maintaining frequent sexual relations with other human beings, without it concerning their own actual partners. A bad habit that is as unnatural as sodomistic degenerate homosexuality and sodomistic degenerate bisexuality and sodomy itself, which in its first form is also already producing its consequences through the Caribbean herpes, also a degenerative disease of incurable form, which in the foreseeable future can become as deadly and under certain circumstances incurable as the AIDS epidemic, if Earth humans do not immediately put a stop to their sexual gender Ausartung, having gotten very badly out of the good human nature.
This can yet become cheerful.
Unfortunately, these are not the only diseases and epidemics, because in foreseeable times, still other and much worse ones will follow. On the one hand, the new diseases and epidemics to be expected come from human beings, and through their own fault in a direct form. On the other hand, indirect consequences will also appear, namely through nature destroyed by human beings as well as through animals. And furthermore, new pathogens of diseases and epidemics will also be brought in from space through the space capsules, etc., as well as through the flight of peoples. Old epidemics and diseases will be carried and spread anew in the future, when human beings flee to foreign countries as a result of war turmoil and persecution, which will become more and more prevalent in the coming time, because millions of human beings will flee from their home countries.
Again, that is well known to me. But now, explain to me the concerns surrounding the plague.
It does not just concern the plague, over which I have to explain a few things to you, for many other pests, diseases, and epidemics are likewise to be mentioned. The plague, for example, could have never claimed so many human lives on the earth if the Earth humans would have thought and acted rationally, and also would have given sufficient attentiveness to their cleanliness. Just like today, the Earth humans already kept pets at early times, such as cats, dogs, and birds, etc. This was an incomprehensible, irresponsible, and criminal act against human lives because animals of each kind living in the direct living areas results in disease and downfall. Human beings who keep animals in their direct living areas deserve to be expelled from the human community and banished for so long, until they have reflected upon the truth and the right course of action, because as a result of the animals living in the direct residential areas, not only do the owners become sick and susceptible to disease, but also all other occupants in the same building. In addition, it goes so far that these emerging diseases are displaced outwardly, and thus, other humans are infected with them. For this reason, no animals ever belong in the living spaces of human beings. Yet now to the plague. The main carrier of the disease was the rat, which was present everywhere in huge herds at the time of the plague. At the same principal position, the house cat and the house dog, as well as the wild animals of these species, served as disease carriers in an indirect manner. The parasites living on these animals, namely the fleas, were and still are responsible for the transmission and the epidemic-like spread of diseases and epidemics. In truth, it is only purely theoretically possible to keep pets without fleas. But theory is of no use because both science, as well as the healthy common sense and practical knowledge of millenniums, prove that having pets without fleas is just a dream, without the possibility of realization. Nevertheless, very many humans who own pets deny that their animals are infested with fleas. The human beings even believe that fleas in pets could be kept within certain limits, and that only morally depraved or unclean humans or pets would have fleas. In truth, however, successful freedom from fleas in animals is not possible at all, even with almost superhuman cleanliness in human beings. The Earth human being who still believes that only vagabonds can get fleas underestimates both the flea and overestimates the human beings.
You speak to me from the heart, and moreover, may I once read to you something that I found in a small booklet?
You make me curious.
Good. Then listen. Here it is written. The flea is not only incalculably far superior in number to all existing pets, together with all their owners and co-owners, but it also controls an arsenal of the most extremely refined tools, and works only imaginable tricks with all of these. Thus, for at least 40 million years, fossilized fleas have been found in amber deposits from the Oligocene epoch. The flea has spread over the Earth in very numerous species. How many species actually are there on our Earth, do you know this?
17,684 are known to us. The earthly scientists, etc., only know of about half.
Well, no matter, whatever number might always be true, for here it is written that all fleas of the insect order Siphonaptera belong to the so-called sucking wingless. The name, as it is written here, describes the common flea quite accurately. The adults live exclusively off of warm blood, which they suck out of their victims after they have drilled their sharp, flexible proboscis into the skin. Fleas are nearly rectangular in shape, have no neck, and thanks to their smooth sides, they are in a perfect position to slip through a thicket of fur hair, feathers, or warm underwear. At their feet, they have double claws, with which they can cling to the skin if they are in the mood for a meal.
That is of correctness. And because that is so, the Earth human has another reason to pay extremely close attention to their hygiene and not allow there to be growth of hair in any places where the fleas feel most comfortable, particularly in the pubic area. And because the Earth human's pubic area is still covered with hair for a lot of evolution-obstructive reasons, it should be artificially depilated, for only in this manner can it truly be kept hygienically clean.
That is what you just said. But good, here it is written further. Fleas are usually up to 5 millimeters long and strongly flattened on the sides. Every dog that has ever crushed a flea between its teeth, and every person who has ever tried to crack one between the fingernails, knows what pressure this little animal endures. But it is rather difficult to take the life of a flea. If someone has one, it is almost impossible to catch it. It is simply the best jumper in the world. The human flea, for example, jumps 35 centimeters far and 20 centimeters high. A person with this leaping power could jump 150 meters far and 85 meters high. A comparatively large group of fleas goes about it completely differently. Chicken fleas and sand fleas, for example, do not jump but rather bore themselves into the particularly inviting and sheltered spots of the skin of the victim and remain stuck there. They are particularly troublesome for beachgoers, who walk along barefoot or who sunbathe in the nude, lying face down in the sand, whereby the fleas press themselves, particularly with great pleasure, into the pubic area. In addition, they are also very troublesome for birds, and especially for those people, of whom they penetrate under the toenails. You see, Quetzal, even here a smart aleck writes about the flea in the pubic area.
A certain degree of wisdom cannot be denied to the writer.
Exactly, but listen further. Usually the fleas mate on the body of a warm-blooded host. In some species, like the human flea Pelex irritans, for example, the male only mates after an abundant, satisfying blood meal. Only then does he go on the search for a female. When one considers how small such a flea is, and how large a Danish Mastiff is, it can become rather adventurous. Yet after a long stalking through fur or feathers, the male flea usually meets the object of his affection. But for insect relations, fleas are just not very fertile because a female, throughout the whole time of her reproductive period, only lays about a dozen eggs each time, so only a total of about 500. These white oval eggs roll away from the body of the host animal and generally remain under carpets, in the cracks of wood, or in clothes, etc., just everywhere where dust collects. Then they hatch into small, maggot-shaped larvae, which live on plant and animal waste. The larva then spins a cocoon, out of which the adult flea finally emerges. Fleas live relatively long, namely up to 2.5 years, and they survive under all possible environmental conditions, except in extreme heat, cold, wetness, or dryness. They thrive best between temperatures of 18 and 37 degrees, and with an air humidity of 65–70%. One can readily see what place has ideal conditions, and at the same time, offers warm blood in large quantities, namely, the human habitation. Many warm-blooded animals have their own types of flea. In addition to the human flea, there are the cat, dog, chicken, bat, rat, rabbit, bird, fox, and horse flea, etc., with which the list would still not be fulfilled or be complete for a very long time. Now, these aforementioned flea designations should not lead to wrong optimism. However, because a hungry flea of every kind, whether dog or cat flea, bird or rat flea, jumps on every host that it can reach, thus also on humans, on you and me.
One moment. My friend, because in addition, I have to explain something with regard to the plague. Also concerning the AIDS pandemic. In addition to the rats, dogs and cats were and still are indirect culprits in the propagation of these and other epidemics. The reason is that they are inhabited by a large number of fleas, which are, in turn, the best carriers of all diseases and epidemics. Even immune, they jump from host to host to stab him with their trunk in order to get to the blood and at the same time infect the host with diseases and epidemics. If the flea pricks the host, then at the same time, proteins infected with pathogens of diseases and epidemics are injected into the tiny wound, which first causes irritation, itching, and swelling, according to which the pathogens of diseases and epidemics then start to become active. Thus, not only did the rat become a deadly spreader of disease through the folly of the earth humans, but also cats and dogs, which were disastrously kept by the people as pets, and, in spite of everything, are still kept in the same irresponsible manner to this very day. The fleas carried by cats and dogs jumped onto animals, such as the rats, which were the carriers of the bubonic plague at that time. The fleas then pricked the animals infected with the pathogens of diseases or epidemics and sucked up the blood containing the epidemic agents or pathogens. Thus, the plague bacillus was carried over from the rats by cat fleas and dog fleas, which were then transported to domestic animals of the same kind, and so were carried by cats and dogs into the immediate area of the person and into his residential premises, where the infected fleas then jumped onto people and infected them with the bubonic plague bacillus, which cost the lives of about 50 million humans during the time of the last plague, as a result of their own insanity and through their own lack of hygiene. For they kept domestic animals in their own residential premises, or came into direct contact with such animals, and even caressed them, which is still insanely and irresponsibly the case with the Earth humans today, whereby such events can and actually do appear again.
But the pathogens by which a flea is infected also ultimately kill the flea, if I am correctly oriented. Bacilli, viruses, and other agents of disease or pathogens are true monsters that destroy everything in final consequence.
That is of correctness, because even a flea is killed by the pathogens over time, but usually not through the outbreak of the disease in itself, because the rule is that the flea itself is immune to it. Thus, other factors appear with it, which bring it to death. For example, with the infection of the bubonic plague bacillus, It happens that the plague bacilli collect in small bundles in the stomach of the flea and soon block and clog the pylorus. Thus the flea falls into a regular feeding frenzy, and it just eats and sucks up only as much as what is possible for it, as it jumps from one host to another.
And with each pass, a new injection of the plague and thus death are dispensed.
An inevitable result.
I have also learned that even the flea itself is used as a host, by microscopic parasites and even by certain mites, which can be transported around by it, as the flea lets itself be carried around by hosts, by animals and humans. In addition, the parasites clinging to the fleas are also carriers of diseases and epidemics.
That is also of correctness. Nevertheless, there are not only the fleas and their parasites that displace diseases and epidemics, but also the human himself or herself. He or she often continues to displace diseases and epidemics through their irrationality, through their uncleanliness, or through foolishness and ignorance. It is also like this in the case of herpes and the AIDS epidemic. So, for example, there are various vaccines against other diseases that, through carelessness, negligence, desire for profit, and depravity, are contaminated with pathogens of herpes and AIDS, whereby the epidemics become indirectly transmitted and displaced. Furthermore, this is also the case with blood plasma, whereby especially hemophiliacs get sick with the AIDS epidemic. Then, also the factor of those who are addicted to medicines. Alcohol and drugs should be noted, whose physical defense systems are already impaired by addictions and which, accordingly, exhibit particularly strong susceptibility to such epidemics. Even with the pestilences, it was already the case then, but in much smaller measures, for the only hallucinogens at that time were the very common drugs, namely opium, which then held the role of being a fashionable drug. But the main causes of the transmission of the plague and the epidemics were the rats, dogs, and cats, with which the flea carried the transmitters. The main cause in the future, however, will be the human himself or herself, and AIDS will only be the first worldwide epidemic that he or she will allow to run rampant, whereby the relentlessly rising overpopulation of other deadly diseases will be generated, through which someday a violent decimation of humankind will result.
If you will, I have some interesting sentences here that relate to this, which I would like to read to you.
Then let me hear.
Good, it is written here. As a rule, a person has adept fingers and hands, very little hair, and is in the habit of washing himself or herself with soap and water, whereby they can somewhat keep the flea away from the body. However, this is only to some extent because in regards to keeping oneself completely free of fleas, also of lice and other parasites, a person is not capable of this, and animals are all the less capable of do so, which themselves can never be freed from this vermin, even with the most thorough cleaning by chemical means. Nevertheless, a person can extensively protect themselves through extreme cleanliness, largely because their sparse hair growth allows this cleanliness to be possible, whereby it must be ensured that hair growth is removed from all places where cleanliness is naturally impeded and where, as a remnant of early human physical development, hair has not disappeared yet, and in this regard the pubic hair portion is being addressed. This is a portion of the human body that requires quite special attention and cleanliness, and which corresponds to a particular popularity of fleas, lice, and other parasites, as well as direct pathogens of diseases and epidemics, which is why the pubic area should not only be maintained more and be submitted to a thorough cleaning at least twice a day, at least in the morning and in the evening, but also that the pubic hair should be removed most thoroughly, and the pubic area should be kept free of a lot of hair, such as by shaving or depilatories. This
This is extremely interesting. From what kind of writing have you taken this article?
It is just a brochure with the title, Time Bomb Epidemic and Illness. As author of the article, here is Albert Linden. Here is the year 1968. Any more does not arise from it. There is an introduction written here, with the permission of the Medical Council. But information on the country of origin, etc. is missing.
That really is not important. It would have only interested me as to how the author's power has discovered the truth, also with regard to the pubic hair and the need for its removal.
Unfortunately, that is not clear from the article, but continue to hear what is written here.
Can you then leave me the writing?
Of course, but now listen. Animals are much worse off than humans, for they can never submit themselves to such a self-cleaning, as this is possible for the person. However, a person is not and will never be in a position to clean an animal or keep it pure in such a manner that it would actually be freed from parasites. So that the person may suffer no harm, there is only the precaution of thorough cleanliness, wherein also public employment is included, and also the basic implementation of the fact that never and under no circumstances can animals and birds of all kinds find entrance and a place in the direct or indirect residential premises of human beings.
And it is also fundamentally important to note here that after contact with animals, the person should immediately and thoroughly cleanse the affected areas of their body, as they should also never caress the animals' mouths, etc., as is morbidly and wrongly done on the earth very frequently. But if human beings do this anyway, then they must absolutely ensure that, at least, no intimate touching and the like take place, such as kissing, for such people are undoubtedly infected by pathogens that were transmitted by animals, and which exhibit periods of outbreak up to 7 or even 50 years, such as with the next upcoming epidemic, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE for short, also called mad cow disease, which will become dangerous for the person in form of the Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome, about which you must remain publicly silent, however, until the year 1990.
With the periods of outbreak, do you mean the incubation time during which the body develops the disease or epidemic and breaks out if the pathogens are not completely neutralized or eliminated by the body's self-defense system?
That is of correctness. But with that, we should now conclude this subject again, because there are still many things to mention which have reference to other concerns.
From my side, you can continue with the predictions. We stopped at the AIDS epidemic, of which you said that it will have a greater impact in Switzerland, etc., already in the middle of the year 1983, and this through the medical profession or the like. And through public communication and publication means, everything will be minimized in order to avoid a panic.
Right. But regarding this, I forgot to mention that this trivialization will also sometimes arise from irresponsibility and ignorance.
The Earth human is simply a miracle of impropriety.
That one can indeed say in very many respects.
That is why I say it, yes.
But now, we really should go on, my friend.
Then go already.
Do you still remember the assassination attempt on the Pope?
How could I not?
Very well. Indeed, it was just a question because the consequences will continue for a long time.
You mean that the relevant things are not concluded yet, and that even further impacts will arise from this?
That is correct, because in the middle of the year 1983, further consequences will arise in this connection.
Then speak at last, and do not let yourself unbutton each word individually.
The assassin is to be set free as a result of extortionate kidnapping. Therefore, a younger girl will be kidnapped, so that the Italian government will be forced by extortion to release the murderer and assassin Ali Agca.